with extreme care. Tonight was no exception, but there was a palpable tension in the air, like a storm was brewing. Natalia Petro navigated the tables with practiced stealth, the kind perfected by servers who'd learned that being noticed meant vulnerability. Her black uniform allowed her to all but disappear into the restaurant's shadows, her footsteps silent on marble floors that were worth more than most people earned in a year. She'd been working at Cello Nero for 8 months, always on time, unfailingly polite, never daring to ask questions about the men in ridiculously expensive suits who spoke in code and left envelopes bulging with cash. Table 12 needs water. Marco hissed at her, the head waiter's face ashen with anxiety. And for God's sake, avoid eye contact. Natalia nodded, carefully filling crystal glasses from a bottle that probably cost more than her entire weekly paycheck. Table 12 was Adrian Moretti's private booth, tucked away in the back corner where hushed conversations went to die before they could reach any unintended ears. She'd served him before, always keeping her eyes lowered, her Russian accent deliberately suppressed beneath carefully rehearsed English. Tonight, however, the booth held 6 men instead of the usual 4. Moretti was seated at the center, his silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed, his navy suit tailored to the absolute peak of perfection. At 45, he exuded authority like other men carried weapons, constantly loaded and always ready to fire. His dark eyes continuously scanned the room, cataloging potential threats, calculating the odds. The 2 unfamiliar men wore subtly different suits, with Eastern European cuts that just didn't quite fit them right around the shoulders. They spoke in low, guttural tones that made even Moretti's men shift uncomfortably in their seats. One was built like a tank, with a jagged scar slicing right through his left eyebrow. The other was unervingly thin and twitchy, his fingers drumming a nervous tattoo against the tabletop. Natalia approached with the water, her heart suddenly pounding in her ears like a drum solo. The scarred man was speaking, and the sound of his words hit her like a physical punch. Russian. Pure, unadulterated Russian from somewhere near Moscow, maybe? The shipment arrives Tuesday, he said in her native tongue. But the price has changed. Your Italian friend needs to understand. We are not negotiating anymore. Moretti's lieutenant, a guy known only as S, whose hands were the size and shape of concrete blocks, leaned forward, a puzzled look on his face. What's he saying? Anybody understand this? The Russians simply ignored him, continuing their conversation. The thin one pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. These are the names of everyone who knows about the transaction. If Moretti cannot agree to our terms, we have other buyers lined up. The Colombians are very interested. Natalia's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as she poured the water. She understood every single word, every threat, every minute detail about what sounded like a massive weapons shipment worth millions, possibly tens of millions, the kind of deal that could dramatically shift the balance of power across multiple criminal organizations. Does anybody in this godforsaken organization speak Russian? Moretti's voice was deceptively quiet, but the simmering fury beneath it made everyone at the table freeze in place. I pay you people to be prepared for absolutely everything. And I'm sitting here like a deaf man while these Slavic bastards talk circles around me. S spread his hands helplessly. Boss, we got guys who speak Spanish, Italian, even Mandarin. But Russian. That's useless, Moretti finished, his jaw visibly tightening. You're all useless. The Russians exchanged knowing glances, smirking. They knew that their linguistic advantage had just become their most potent weapon. The scarred one spoke again, his tone dripping with mockery. Tell the Italian we're tired of waiting. Either he agrees to our new price or we walk. And when we walk, we talk. His enemies would love to get their hands on the dirt we have on the Judge Henderson situation. Natalia's breath hitched in her throat. Judge Henderson? That name had been all over the news 3 months ago. A sudden, unexpected retirement. Whispers and rumors of blackmail, hushed accusations involving organized crime. If these Russians had irrefutable evidence connecting Moretti to that scandal, it wasn't just money that was at stake. It was everything. She should just walk away right now, pour the water, disappear back into the kitchen, completely forget everything she just overheard. That was the path to survival. That was the smart thing to do. But her hands were already starting to tremble, not just from fear, but from something far deeper, something ancient. Haunting memories of another room, another insurmountable language barrier, another soul-crushing moment when silence had cost her absolutely everything. She'd been just 7 years old, watching stone-faced men in leather jackets question her father in rapid-fire Russian, while her mother desperately begged in broken English that nobody seemed to understand. The unforgettable memory of her mother's inconsolable tears, her father's broken body found 3 days later near the docks in Brighton Beach. 60 seconds, the thin Russian announced in his language, checking his expensive watch. Then we leave, and Moretti can try explaining to his associates why he let the biggest opportunity of the decade slip through his fingers simply because he couldn't be bothered to find a translator. Moretti slammed his hand down on the table with terrifying force, making the glasses jump and rattle. Somebody tell me what the hell is going on, or I swear to God. They said they're leaving. Natalia's voice sliced through the thick tension like a razor-sharp blade through silk. And they're threatening to expose you regarding Judge Henderson unless you agree to triple their original asking price for the shipment. The silence that followed was absolute, complete, and total. Every head in the booth swiveled toward her. Moretti's dark, penetrating eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that should have instantly made her want to look away. But something profound had irrevocably shifted deep inside her. The invisible waitress had completely vanished. In her place stood Natalia Petro, daughter of Victor Petro, who had been a translator for the Russian consulate before the wrong kind of people decided he knew far too much for his own good. "You speak Russian?" Moretti's statement was flat, devoid of emotion, but undeniably dangerous. "Yes, sir." "How well?" "I was born in St. Petersburg. I spoke Russian before I spoke English." The scarred Russian's smug smirk had vanished in an instant. He leaned forward, scrutinizing her with renewed, intense interest. "Where in Petersburg?" "Vasilyevsky Island," she answered in flawless Russian, meeting his hard gaze head-on. "Near the 7th line. I lived there until I was 7 before my family was forced to leave." "Had to leave?" the thin one repeated, his nervous fingers finally still on the table. Interesting choice of words. Moretti raised a hand, silencing everyone. "I don't give a damn about anyone's life story right now. What I care about is what these men are actually proposing and why they think they can brazenly threaten me in my own restaurant." He gestured towards the empty chair directly beside him. "Sit. Translate everything." Natalia hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Every single survival instinct screamed that sitting at Adrian Moretti's table meant irrevocably crossing a line she could never, ever uncross. Waitresses were meant to be invisible. Translators, however, were always witnesses. And witnesses in this particular world had a notoriously short life expectancy. But she was already standing squarely in the spotlight. The only remaining question was whether she would use it to illuminate the truth or be consumed by the resulting fire. She sat. The scarred Russian smiled, but there was absolutely no warmth in it. "So, Moretti's gone and found himself a little Petersburg girl. Tell us, little girl, what really brought your family to America? Running from mounting debts? Dangerous enemies? Tell me what you're really here to discuss." Natalia replied in perfect Russian, her voice remaining remarkably steady despite the deafening hammer of her heart. "The weapons shipment is obviously real, but that's clearly not the only reason you're demanding 3 times the originally agreed-upon price. You want something else entirely." The thin one's eyes widened slightly. Around the table, Moretti's men subtly shifted, increasingly confused and undeniably nervous. Only Moretti himself remained perfectly still, watching the unfolding exchange like a seasoned chess master carefully studying an unexpected, potentially game-changing move. "Smart girl," the scarred Russian acknowledged with a slight nod. "Translate this for your new employer. We know about the Judge Henderson payments. We know all about the Brooklyn warehouse fire last July. We know about the senator's daughter and precisely what really happened in Atlantic City. The shipment, that's just simple business, but information is priceless insurance." Natalia turned to Moretti, her voice remarkably calm as she switched back to English. "They're blackmailing you. The weapons deal is completely legitimate, but they're using it as a carefully constructed cover to demand payment for their silence regarding your other, more delicate operations. They claim to have irrefutable evidence about Henderson, the warehouse fire in Brooklyn last July, and something rather unsavory involving a senator's daughter in Atlantic City. Moretti's expression didn't change in the slightest, but his fingers drummed once against the table, the only visible sign of building emotion. Ask them how they managed to obtain this information, he instructed, his voice dangerously low. She translated. The Russians exchanged a fleeting glance. Poetry, the thin one finally said in Russian, a strange smile playing on his lips. We have it all beautifully written in poetry. Pushkin, Lermontov, Brodsky. Exquisite verses that tell the ugliest of stories. Your people would never even begin to understand, even if they somehow managed to find the documents. But we do. And so, it seems, does your little waitress. Natalia's blood instantly turned to ice. She knew exactly what he meant. During the Soviet era, intelligence operatives had routinely used classical poetry as a sophisticated form of code. Specific words, carefully placed line breaks, and subtle references to famous verses could be used to conceal entire networks of classified information. It was an elegant, practically impossible to crack without incredibly deep cultural knowledge, and absolutely deadly if it fell into the wrong hands. They're using coded poetry, she explained to Moretti. Russian classical poetry with sensitive information cleverly hidden within the verses themselves. It's an old KGB technique. For the first time, something unmistakably flickered in Moretti's eyes. Not fear exactly. Men like him had long ago evolved past simple fear, but genuine recognition of real, tangible danger. Can you decode it? He asked, his gaze never leaving hers. If I see it, maybe. It depends on. Show her, Moretti commanded, his piercing gaze still fixed on the Russians. The scarred one laughed, a harsh, grating sound like gravel being tossed around in a blender. Why in the world would we do that? Because I'm going to kill both of you right here, right now, unless you can definitively prove that you actually possess what you claim to possess. My restaurant, my rules. You bring serious allegations, you damn well better bring serious proof. The temperature in the booth seemed to drop at least 10 degrees. S's hand slowly moved towards his jacket. The thin Russian's twitchy fingers twitched toward his pocket. Natalia found herself holding her breath, acutely aware that she was currently sitting in the precise center of a highly volatile powder keg with multiple lit fuses all steadily burning far too short. Peace, the scarred Russian said, raising his hands slowly. We came here for business, not for all-out war. He carefully pulled a folded piece of paper from his inside pocket, sliding it across the table towards Natalia. Read this. Tell your boss exactly what it says. Natalia unfolded the paper with visibly shaking fingers. The handwriting was exceptionally precise, elegantly written in flowing Russian cursive that looked like liquid. At first glance, it simply appeared to be a few verses from Eugene Onegin, Pushkin's undisputed masterpiece. But as her eyes carefully tracked the individual lines, she slowly began to recognize the distinct pattern. Certain carefully chosen words were subtly emphasized with nearly imperceptible marks. Specific line breaks were strategically placed in unnatural locations. References to fairly minor characters appeared where they simply shouldn't. It was both brilliant and utterly terrifying. The first verse, she said slowly, her mind racing to work through the complex layers of hidden meaning. It references Henderson by using the judge character from Pushkin's The Captain's Daughter, but with strategically modified dates that correspond directly to real-world events. The second verse, she paused, her throat suddenly feeling incredibly dry. The second verse lists a series of bank account numbers cleverly disguised as poetic meter. The third describes the Brooklyn warehouse fire using evocative imagery from Lermontov's The Demon, with particularly specific details about the exact accelerant used and the extensive insurance fraud directly involved. Moretti leaned back in his chair, his face utterly unreadable. This is just one page. They mention they have much more, Natalia confirmed. This is just a small sample. Ask them how many pages they actually have. She did. The thin Russian smiled, a truly unsettling sight. 47 pages, 47 individual poems, enough to easily send Mr. Moretti and at least half of his organization to prison for the rest of their natural lives, or directly to the bottom of the frigid Hudson River if his various rivals managed to reach them first. As Natalia translated, she watched Moretti's jaw subtly tighten, almost imperceptibly. She'd just painted a massive target directly on her own back. She knew far too much now. She'd single-handedly decoded their deeply buried secret. She'd suddenly made herself incredibly valuable, which, in this world, was just another painfully efficient way of making yourself overwhelmingly vulnerable. "Name your price," Moretti said quietly, his voice like the steady grinding of ice. "For absolutely everything. The weapons shipment and the entirety of the poetry." The scarred Russian leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of blatant, almost insulting false magnanimity. "Finally, we speak the language of real business. The weapons shipment, 50 crates of quality merchandise from our reliable Serbian associates, will now cost you 12 million instead of the 4 million we originally discussed. As for the poetry, another 10 million for the complete collection, and our absolute guarantee that no copies whatsoever exist. $22 million, Moretti repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "For merchandise that I could easily source elsewhere, and information that you only claim to possess but have yet to definitively prove that you possess in its entirety." "Source elsewhere?" The thin Russian laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "Your Colombian friends after what unfortunately happened to their last shipment last month? Or perhaps the Albanians, who are currently explaining to federal investigators why their warehouse contained more than enough firepower to successfully invade a small country." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with barely contained malice. "We're not just selling you top-of-the-line guns, Mr. Moretti. We're selling you the only guns that are currently available from the only remaining suppliers who haven't already been completely compromised. And the poetry? That's just us being conveniently entrepreneurial." Natalia translated, her mind racing. She'd inadvertently stumbled into something far bigger and far more dangerous than just a simple run-of-the-mill transaction. This was about raw power, fiercely defended territory, and desperate survival at the very highest echelons of organized crime. And somehow, she was now trapped sitting right in the middle of it all. Her once useless knowledge of Russian classical poetry had somehow magically transformed into a highly sought-after currency worth millions upon millions of dollars. "Ask them why they even bothered coming to me," Moretti instructed, his dark eyes never leaving the Russians. "If this information is truly as valuable as they claim, they could easily have sold it to my enemies for far more." The question, when posed in fluent Russian, made both men crack a chilling smile. The scarred one answered without hesitation. "Because selling to your numerous enemies means inevitably starting a brutal war. Wars are always expensive, notoriously unpredictable, and extremely bad for consistent business. We greatly prefer stability. You pay us what we ask, we give you the highly effective tools to successfully neutralize the various threats to your overall operation, and everyone continues to make substantial money. Dead men spend nothing." Pragmatic, Moretti acknowledged with a subtle nod when Natalia translated. "But notably incomplete. There's something you're not telling me. What's the actual reason you're sitting here in my restaurant instead of just auctioning this damning information off to the very highest bidder?" The Russians exchanged a knowing look. Something unspoken and profoundly significant passed directly between them, and Natalia distinctly caught it. A subtle flicker of intense concern, maybe even raw fear. Whatever exactly they were running from, it was clearly big enough to make them actively seek the protection of one of New York's most notoriously dangerous crime bosses. "Tell him," the thin one said in Russian, "that the sensitive information we have comes directly from someone he knows. Someone currently inside his very own organization who's been secretly recording absolutely everything for months. The poetry isn't just valuable information. It's also irrefutable evidence that could easily bury him, yes, but it's also valuable evidence that could effectively expose the traitor in his midst. We're offering him a unique opportunity to find and eliminate the venomous snake before it manages to strike." Natalia's accurate translation fell like a heavy stone into perfectly still water. The resulting ripples of tension visibly spread across Moretti's stony face, subtle but unmistakable. Around the table, his heavily armed men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. S's hand deliberately moved back towards his conveniently placed jacket. The others straightened, suddenly acutely aware that the most dangerous threat could easily come from absolutely any direction, including from potentially within. A traitor, Moretti said slowly, his voice suddenly like razor-sharp ice. Multiple traitors, the scarred Russian corrected through Natalia's chilling translation. The poetry cleverly mentions several names. Not always explicitly, but the subtle references are definitely there for someone who truly knows what to look for, someone who intimately understands both deeply coded Russian literature and the intricate details of your particular business. Every eye in the dimly lit booth turned to Natalia once again. She could physically feel the overwhelming weight of their stares like an intense physical pressure. She wasn't just a disposable translator anymore. She was now the only person in the entire room who had the valuable ability to effectively decode evidence that might very well mean the difference between violent life and sudden, brutal death for everyone present. "How many names?" Moretti asked, his voice devoid of all emotion. 7? Natalia translated the question into Russian, then waited intently for their response. 7, she answered after receiving the Russian reply. Skillfully hidden in 7 different poems using vastly different classical references. They would need to be carefully cross-referenced with your specific organizational structure in order to accurately identify the involved individuals. And you can actually do this? It wasn't just a question. It was a carefully calculated assessment. Natalia swallowed hard, fully aware that her very next words would undoubtedly seal her ultimate fate, one way or the other. Yes. If I have unrestricted access to the entire collection and fairly detailed information about your organization's current hierarchy, I can definitely identify them. Then here's my meticulously considered counteroffer, Moretti announced, his piercing gaze carefully moving between the 2 Russians and the suddenly pivotal Natalia. I'll pay a total of $8 million for the weapons shipment. Fair market value by any totally honest assessment. For the potentially damning poetry, I'll pay an additional $5 million, but only after Miss Petro here has independently verified its authenticity and definitively identified all of the traitors within my organization. You will patiently wait in a secure, undisclosed location while she works. When I have concrete names, you get immediately paid. If the coded information is in any way false, misleading, or even incomplete, you will not be leaving New York alive. The thin Russian started to vehemently protest, but the scarred one abruptly held up a restraining hand. Acceptable, with one absolutely non-negotiable condition. The girl works directly under our careful supervision. We will not be simply handing over the complete poetry collection and then passively disappearing while you leisurely hunt for phantom traitors who might very well not even actually exist. She will painstakingly decode the poetry with us actively present. No, Moretti said flatly, his voice allowing for absolutely no debate. You will wait in a secure location. She works diligently in my private office with my personal security, and entirely under my direct protection. You will receive timely progress updates every 4 hours. When she's completely done, you'll be fully paid and immediately escorted to the nearest airport. That is the only deal that I am prepared to offer. How can we possibly know that you won't simply take the irreplaceable poetry and then just kill us? You can't. But I'm Adrian Moretti, and I certainly don't need to steal potentially compromised information when I can very easily afford to simply buy it outright. More importantly, if I were to suddenly kill you, your highly protective Serbian friends would immediately assume that I've been completely compromised and permanently cease doing business with me altogether. I need those weapons. And I absolutely need reliable suppliers that I can fully trust. Killing you would be incredibly short-sighted and undeniably stupid. And I certainly didn't build this incredibly successful organization by being either. Natalia watched the incredibly tense negotiation unfold with steadily growing horror. She'd somehow gone from being a completely invisible waitress to a highly critical key player in a multi-million-dollar deal involving international arms smuggling, deeply rooted organizational betrayal, and intricately coded Russian poetry. Her hands continued to shake as she mechanically translated the chilling final exchange, the sheer insanity of her current predicament crystallizing with each carefully spoken word. The two nervous Russians conferred quietly in their native language. They apparently didn't realize that she could still easily hear them. Their voices deliberately low, but still not quite low enough. "He's right," the thin one muttered anxiously. "We undeniably need him more than he currently needs us. The notoriously picky Serbians simply won't work with anyone else in all of New York, and we certainly can't effectively move the sensitive merchandise safely through either Boston or Philadelphia. This is absolutely our only legitimate play." "And what about the girl?" the scarred one asked, his voice laced with doubt. "She's undeniably smart. Almost too smart. Maybe she already knows more than she's letting on. It doesn't really matter in the long run. Once Moretti has the precious poetry and confidently identifies his elusive traitors, she's nothing more than a liability. He'll efficiently handle it." Natalia worked hard to keep her face carefully neutral, mechanically translating unrelated conversation while her mind silently screamed, "Warnings! Danger!" She just inadvertently overheard her own death sentence, delivered casually as a complete afterthought. The cold-blooded Russians fully expected Moretti to simply kill her once she had faithfully served her singular purpose. And why wouldn't he? She'd clearly seen far too much, inherently knew far too much, and undeniably represented far too much ongoing risk. "We have a deal," the scarred Russian finally announced in slightly accented English, his expression revealing absolutely nothing. The girl translates, "We wait patiently, we get fully paid, and everyone wins." "Everyone wins," Moretti echoed, standing abruptly. The extremely tense meeting was officially over. He gestured to S and another equally intimidating man. "Take our valued guests to the Riverside property. Make them comfortable but undoubtedly secure. Timely 4-hour updates, just like I promised. Miss Petro, you're coming with me." The two wary Russians quietly departed with Moretti's ever-present men, their undoubtedly forced departure drawing curious glances from the other unsuspecting diners. Natalia remained seated at the table, her legs suddenly feeling incredibly uncertain and shaky beneath her. She just tacitly agreed to carefully decode potentially incriminating documents that could positively identify the deeply entrenched traitors in a powerful crime organization, all while working directly for a ruthless mob boss who would more than likely kill her the instant she finished the incredibly dangerous task. "Stand up," Moretti commanded softly. "Try to look like this is entirely normal. The other staff are closely watching, and I certainly don't need them actively wondering why my otherwise invisible waitress is suddenly sitting at my private table, looking like she's just seen a damn ghost." Natalia rose on noticeably shaking legs. Moretti smoothly moved to stand beside her, his hand lightly touching her elbow in a gesture that would undoubtedly look courteous and completely harmless to any casual observers, but in reality, felt more like a cold, unyielding iron shackle. He silently guided her towards the back of the bustling restaurant, deftly past the busy kitchen, through a door discreetly marked private, and into a lavish office that reeked of expensive leather, strong cigar smoke, and a palpable sense of quiet menace. The heavy door closed with a soft, almost inaudible click that sounded far too much like a prison cell door slowly locking. Moretti moved purposefully to his massive desk, pouring 2 generous glasses of rich amber liquid from an exquisite crystal decanter. He silently held one out to her. "Drink. You look like you definitely need it." "I don't." "It's not a request." Natalia hesitantly took the proffered glass, the strong whiskey instantly burning its way down her throat, but also noticeably steadying her shattered nerves. Moretti deliberately settled into his large chair, studying her with exactly the same unnerving intensity he had directed at the 2 cagey Russians. "So, Natalia Petro from Vasilyevsky Island," he began, his voice dangerously smooth. "Why is a highly intelligent woman who speaks absolutely fluent Russian, and is also uniquely capable of decoding complex Soviet-era intelligence techniques, currently working as a low-paid waitress in my otherwise reputable restaurant? I needed a job. I didn't consciously lie on my employment application. You also notably didn't mention that you're basically a highly trained walking codebreaker, either." He deliberately sipped his whiskey, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "Your father, Victor Petro, what exactly did he really do before you and your mother came to America?" Natalia's chest instantly tightened. Nobody knew anything about her father's hidden history. She'd consciously spent the vast majority of her adult life diligently burying that undeniably painful history, methodically creating as much distance as humanly possible between the constantly scared 7-year-old refugee and the careful, practically invisible adult she had painstakingly become. He was a translator at the Russian consulate. That's all. No, Moretti said quietly, his penetrating gaze unwavering. That's absolutely not all. Translators certainly don't teach their children extremely secretive KGB poetry codes. Translators don't abruptly end up dead in Brighton Beach with their terrified families desperately running for their very lives. So please try again, Miss Petro. And this time, please don't deliberately lie to the volatile man who's actually about to trust you with highly sensitive information that could easily destroy him. The richly appointed room spun slightly. Natalia carefully set down her glass on the polished desk before she inadvertently dropped it. My father was recruited by the FSB, the direct successor to the KGB, to diligently manage confidential communications between Russian organized crime and their American contacts. He diligently translated for them, but he also decoded complex messages, painstakingly identified key patterns, and regularly reported back to Moscow. When he finally tried to stop, when he tearfully said he desperately wanted to protect his immediate family, they brutally made a very public example of him. And your mother sadly died just 3 years later. Cancer officially, but she was never even remotely the same after what happened to my father. I honestly think that she simply gave up. Moretti nodded slowly, the missing pieces of the complex puzzle finally falling ominously into place. So, you essentially grew up fully understanding that classified information is incredibly dangerous, that being uniquely valuable to the wrong kind of people is frequently a de facto death sentence, and that the only genuinely smart way to survive in this particularly brutal world is to constantly be completely invisible. Yes, which makes what happened tonight completely and utterly out of character for you. You deliberately revealed yourself, your incredibly valuable skills, your unique, potentially world-altering knowledge. Why? The unasked question hung heavily in the tense air between them. Why had she actually spoken up? Why had she deliberately chosen visibility over simple safety? Active involvement over easy escape? Natalia desperately searched for an honest answer that made at least a little bit of sense, even to herself. But the stark truth was simply too complicated and far too raw. Because I was just 7 years old when my beloved father died, and nobody could adequately translate what was actually happening at the time. The local police didn't understand fluent Russian. The highly stressed doctors didn't speak understandable English well enough to properly explain to my distraught mother exactly why she kept constantly crying. And I was still just a scared child desperately trying to make sense of highly emotional adults speaking completely different languages directly past each other. She finally met Moretti's unwavering gaze directly. I've spent my entire life silently watching otherwise reasonable people utterly fail to effectively communicate, silently watching petty misunderstandings steadily turn into senseless violence. Tonight, I actually had the rare ability to effectively prevent that from actually happening, so I simply did. Noble, Moretti observed with a slight smirk. Also incredibly stupid. Those 2 kg Russians you so conveniently helped fully expect me to kill you the instant this is all finally over. They deliberately said so in Russian, clearly thinking that you only just translated everything they said and weren't actively still listening. I know. I clearly heard them. And you still knowingly agreed to decode the potentially volatile poetry. I honestly didn't see that I actually had a viable choice at all. There's always an actual choice, Miss Petro. Moretti slowly stood, deliberately moving to stand by the expansive window overlooking the bustling restaurant below. You could have easily stayed totally quiet. Let us all flounder helplessly. Let the entire ridiculously dangerous deal simply fall completely apart. Instead, you deliberately made yourself utterly indispensable, which inherently means that you're now actually in the exact same inherently precarious position that you've consistently spent your entire adult life carefully trying to avoid. So what actually happens now? Natalia asked, her voice sounding noticeably steadier than she actually felt. I diligently decode your incredibly complex poetry, confidently identify your deeply embedded traitors, and then you quietly tie up all the remaining loose ends? Moretti slowly turned back to face her, his inscrutable expression revealing absolutely nothing. That entirely depends on what you successfully find and just how surprisingly useful you ultimately prove to be. The KG Russians may mistakenly think that you're easily disposable. They're demonstrably wrong. Someone who can skillfully decode complex Soviet poetry, fluently speak multiple disparate languages, and consistently keep her composure even in the midst of a tense criminal negotiation is certainly not disposable. That's exceedingly rare. Are you honestly saying that I suddenly work for you now? I'm honestly saying that we'll just have to see. First, diligently prove that you can actually do everything that you confidently claim that you can do. Then, and only then, we'll properly discuss your future career prospects, fully assuming that you even actually have one. The private office that Moretti subsequently provided wasn't remotely what Natalia had been expecting. Instead of the darkly lit, in contrast to the cramped, claustrophobic room she'd imagined, he led her to a converted library on the third floor of the building connected to Ceiling Nero. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, packed with leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. A heavy wooden desk sat before a tall window overlooking the Manhattan skyline, and a laptop waited on its polished surface. The poetry is being delivered electronically, Moretti explained, entering a password that brought the screen to life. Our Russian friends were smart enough not to carry physical copies through airport security. Everything is stored in encrypted files, which my IT person has already accessed and downloaded. The original files will be deleted from their source in 6 hours, so they have motivation to ensure you succeed. Natalia approached the desk cautiously, as if the laptop might bite. The screen displayed a folder containing 47 document files, each titled with a different Russian classical work. You have someone who can break Russian encryption? I have someone who can break any encryption, given enough time and money. Don't worry about how it was done. Focus on what needs to happen next. Moretti gestured to a small table near the desk where food and coffee had been arranged. You'll work through the night. I'll be downstairs handling other business, but there are 2 guards outside the door for your protection. My protection or my imprisonment? Both. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Everything you discover, every name you decode, you report directly to me. Nobody else. Not my lieutenants. Not the guards. Not even in your own notes unless they're on that laptop, which is completely isolated from any network. The information you're about to access could start a war inside my organization. Discretion isn't optional. It's survival. Understood. I doubt that, Moretti replied, his tone almost gentle. But you will. The door closed behind him, followed by the click of a lock. Natalia was alone with 47 poems and the secrets they contained. She poured coffee with shaking hands, the rich aroma steadying her nerves, and opened the first file. The document contained verses from Pushkin's Eugene Onegin, specifically the sections dealing with betrayal and social obligation. The formatting was precise. The Russian text was rendered in an elegant typeface that mimicked handwriting. At first glance, it appeared to be a simple transcription. But as Natalia began reading closely, the patterns emerged. Classical Soviet-era code techniques relied on several methods. Specific word substitution, emphasized syllables indicating numerical values, references to minor characters representing real people, and structural anomalies like unexpected line breaks or stanza arrangements. The poetry before her employed all of these techniques simultaneously, creating layers of meaning that required both linguistic expertise and cultural knowledge to unravel. The first poem yielded a date, July 15th of the previous year, and a location, Warehouse District, Brooklyn. Cross-referencing with the sample the Russians had shown earlier, this corresponded to the fire Moretti had been accused of orchestrating, but the coded text contained additional information, insurance policy numbers, payoff amounts, and a name embedded in a reference to Onegin's friend, Lenski. Lenski, the poet in Pushkin's masterpiece, someone artistic, someone whose role was documentation and observation. In Moretti's organization, that would be. Natalia opened a notepad file on the laptop and began typing her analysis. She worked methodically, moving through the first 5 poems in 2 hours. The pattern became clearer with each decoded verse. Whoever had created this record possessed intimate knowledge of Moretti's operations, combined with a sophisticated understanding of Russian literary codes. This wasn't just information gathering. It was an art form, designed to be beautiful even as it betrayed. By 3 in the morning, she decoded 15 poems and identified 3 names. The references were subtle but unmistakable once you understood the literary allusions. A mention of Lermontov's Pechorin character, a cynical manipulator, corresponded with financial records and a man whose role in Moretti's organization involved money laundering. A reference to Gogol's Dead Souls pointed to someone managing false identities and paperwork. Each name appeared multiple times across different poems, the repetition confirming they weren't coincidences. Natalia stood to stretch, her back aching from hours of focused concentration. She moved to the window, looking out at the city lights that never quite went dark. Somewhere out there, the 3 men whose names she decoded were going about their lives, unaware that their betrayal had been documented in verses they couldn't read, couldn't understand, and definitely couldn't fight. A knock at the door made her jump. The lock clicked, and Moretti entered, his suit jacket removed, his tie loosened. He looked tired but alert, his eyes immediately going to the laptop screen. "Progress?" he asked. 3 names so far from the first 15 poems. The coding is consistent and sophisticated. Whoever created this knew your organization intimately and had formal training in Soviet intelligence techniques. This isn't amateur work. "Show me." Natalia pulled up her analysis notes, explaining each literary reference and how it corresponded to specific operations and individuals. Moretti listened without interruption, his face revealing nothing as she detailed evidence of betrayal from men he trusted. "These 3, he said finally. "You're certain?" "As certain as I can be without external verification. The references appear multiple times, the details are specific, and the pattern is consistent. If these poems are authentic and based on the information you already confirmed, they appear to be, then yes, I'm certain." Moretti pulled out his phone, typing a message. "Continue working. I'll handle this. What are you going to do?" He looked at her, and for a moment she saw past the calculated crime boss to something colder, more primal. "What I always do when someone betrays me. Make an example that ensures nobody else is tempted to follow their path." "You're going to kill them." "No," Moretti corrected. "I'm going to verify your information first. If you're right, then yes, they'll die. If you're wrong, you'll die. Accuracy matters in this business, Miss Petrova. I suggest you double-check your work before I act on it." He left before she could respond. Natalia returned to the laptop with renewed urgency, re-examining every reference, every allusion, every coded detail. She found no errors. The 3 names were solid, supported by multiple independent references across different poems. Whoever had documented Moretti's operations had been meticulous, creating redundancy that made the information verifiable. She continued working, driven by fear and fascination in equal measure. The next 10 poems yielded 2 more names and revealed something even more disturbing: a timeline. The betrayals weren't random or opportunistic. They were coordinated, following a specific sequence designed to weaken Moretti's organization systematically. Someone was orchestrating this, using multiple traitors as pieces in a larger strategy. The 26th poem stopped her cold. It was verses from Brodsky's letters to a Roman friend, a meditation on power, exile, and the inevitable fall of empires. But hidden within the elegant lines was a reference that made her blood freeze. "The daughter who speaks both tongues, neither trusted nor trusting." A daughter who speaks both tongues, Russian and English. Someone bilingual, someone positioned to translate, someone who could operate in both worlds. Someone exactly like Natalia herself. She read the passage 3 times, hoping she'd misunderstood. But the meaning was clear. The person who'd created these poems knew about her. Knew she existed, knew she worked at Cellero, knew she possessed the exact skills needed to decode the information. This wasn't coincidence. She'd been part of the plan from the beginning. The door opened again. Moretti entered with 3 other men, all carrying themselves with the casual violence of people who'd killed before and would again. He approached the desk, his expression grave. "Your 3 names checked out," he said quietly. "We found evidence exactly where your poetry suggested. Financial records, communications, dead drops. You were right about everything. I need to show you something, Natalia interrupted, pulling up the 26th poem. Her hands shook as she highlighted the relevant section. This passage, it references someone like me, someone bilingual positioned to translate. The person who created these poems knew I was here, knew I could decode them. This whole situation, the Russians coming tonight, me being forced to reveal myself. Everything. It was orchestrated. Moretti leaned over the desk, reading the screen carefully. His jaw tightened. Who knew you spoke Russian before tonight? Nobody at the restaurant. I never put it on my application. I deliberately kept it hidden. Then someone outside the restaurant knew. Someone who tracked you, identified your skills, and engineered this entire situation. He straightened, his mind visibly working through the implications. The Russians didn't stumble onto this poetry. They were given it, probably by whoever created it. They came to me specifically because they knew I'd need a translator, and they knew you'd be here to provide those services. But why? What's the end game? You're the end game, one of the other men said, speaking for the first time. He was older than Moretti, silver-haired with eyes like flint. Think about it. You decode the poetry, identify traitors, prove your value. Moretti keeps you alive because you're useful. But now he has to trust you completely because you know everything. Meanwhile, the person who created this poetry has embedded a spy right in his inner circle. And there's nothing he can do about it because killing you means losing the only person who can decode the remaining poems. That's insane, Natalia protested. I'm not a spy. I didn't even know this was happening until tonight. Doesn't matter, Moretti said, his voice tired. Innocent or not, you're now positioned exactly where someone wanted you. The question is whether I can trust that you're actually innocent, or whether everything you've told me tonight is part of an incredibly sophisticated play. The room fell silent. Natalia felt the weight of suspicion pressing down from all sides. She'd gone from invisible waitress to suspected double agent in less than 12 hours. And the worst part was that she couldn't prove her innocence. Everything that had happened fit the pattern of elaborate manipulation. Even her genuine surprise could be an act. There's only one way to resolve this, she said finally. Let me finish decoding all 47 poems. If I'm a spy, the remaining texts will reveal my purpose or my handlers. If I'm innocent, they'll show who really created this trap and what they wanted to accomplish. Or, Moretti countered, the remaining poems will give you more information about my organization, making you an even more valuable asset to whoever sent you. So what's your alternative? Kill me now and lose the chance to decode the rest? Keep me prisoner forever? Trust is a choice, Mr. Moretti. Either you make it or you don't. But you can't stay suspended between the two forever. And based on what these poems are revealing, you don't have time to waste doubting me. There are 4 more traitors in your organization, and they're following a coordinated timeline. Every hour you wait is an hour they have to prepare. Moretti studied her face for a long moment, his dark eyes searching for deception, for weakness, for any sign that would make his decision easier. Finally, he turned to the 3 men behind him. Out all of you, I need to think. They left without argument, the door closing behind them with that same soft click that had become the soundtrack to Natalia's new reality. Moretti moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders tense beneath his tailored shirt. My father taught me that trust is currency, he said quietly. You spend it carefully, you invest it wisely, and you never, ever extend credit to someone who hasn't earned it. In 30 years, I've built an organization on that principle. Tonight, you're asking me to bankrupt that account on a gamble. I'm asking you to recognize that we're both trapped in the same cage, Natalia replied. Someone designed this situation to put us at odds. They knew you'd suspect me, knew I'd have no way to prove my innocence, knew that doubt would paralyze you at exactly the moment you need to act decisively. Don't give them what they want. And what do they want? Chaos, uncertainty, you distracted and vulnerable while your real enemies move against you. The poetry isn't just documentation. It's a weapon, and right now it's pointed at both of us. Moretti turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, Natalia saw something other than calculated control in his expression. He looked human, tired, almost lost. "Finish the poems," he said. "But understand this. I'm assigning someone to watch you every second. Not guards outside the door. Someone in here with you, reading every word, watching every move. If there's any indication that you're communicating with anyone outside this room, if there's any suggestion that you're anything other than what you claim, I will kill you myself. Not my men. Me. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Then get back to work. We're running out of time." The person Moretti assigned to watch her was a woman named Elena, somewhere in her 40s with sharp features and sharper eyes. She settled into an armchair near the desk without introduction, a laptop of her own balanced on her knees. Natalia didn't ask what Elena was doing. The answer was obvious. Monitoring, recording, analyzing every keystroke, every expression, every breath. Natalia returned to the poems with renewed focus. The 27th through 30th documents revealed the fourth traitor, someone in logistics who'd been rerouting shipments and skimming profits. The evidence was damning and precise, hidden in verses from Akhmatova's Requiem, a poem about suffering and betrayal written during Stalin's purges. The irony wasn't lost on Natalia. Betrayal wrapped in poetry about betrayal, layers upon layers of meaning that turned literature into ammunition. By dawn, she'd decoded 35 poems and identified 6 traitors in total. But the remaining 12 documents troubled her. The pattern was changing. The earlier poems had been straightforward. Names, dates, evidence. But poems 36 through 47 employed different techniques, more abstract references, deeper codes. Whoever had created them had shifted from documentation to something else entirely. "Coffee?" Elena asked, speaking for the first time in hours. Her voice was surprisingly warm, at odds with her surveillance role. "Please," Natalia answered, grateful for the break. Her eyes ached from screen glare, her head throbbed from concentration, and her entire body felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry. Elena poured from the carafe that had been refreshed throughout the night, adding cream without asking, somehow knowing how Natalia preferred it. "You're good at this," she observed the decoding. "Adrian's had analysts before, but nobody who could work through Soviet codes like you're doing. My father was a good teacher." "Was?" Elena repeated, catching the past tense. "He's gone a long time ago. Mine too. Died in a prison in Chechnya when I was 12. Wrong place, wrong politics, wrong everything." Elena sipped her own coffee, her gaze steady on Natalia. "We're not so different, you and I. Children of lost fathers trying to survive in a world that doesn't forgive mistakes. You work for Moretti. I work for survival. Adrian pays well, protects his people, and doesn't ask questions about where we came from or what we're running from. That's rare in this business. Most bosses want to own your past so they can control your future. Adrian just wants loyalty and competence. And you think I can provide both? I think you don't have a choice. Neither of us do. So, the question isn't whether you're loyal. It's whether you're smart enough to recognize that survival means embracing the situation rather than fighting it." Natalia took a long drink of coffee, letting the caffeine and Elena's words work through her system. There was truth in what the woman said. Fighting against her circumstances wouldn't change them. The only path forward was through the remaining poems, through Moretti's suspicions, through whatever trap had been laid. "The last 12 poems are different," Natalia said, pulling up document 36. "The coding has changed. See here? Instead of straightforward substitution and literary reference, there's mathematical sequencing embedded in the meter. Specific syllable counts that don't match the original works. It's more sophisticated, harder to crack." Elena moved to stand behind her, studying the screen. "What does that tell you?" "That whoever created these poems wanted to slow me down at this point. The first 35 were meant to be decoded relatively quickly. Identify the obvious traitors, create urgency, force Moretti to act. But these last 12, they're designed to take time, which means something is happening on a specific timeline," Elena finished. And whoever set this in motion needs you occupied while it unfolds. The realization hit them simultaneously. Natalia spun in her chair, meeting Elena's alarmed gaze. How long have I been in this room? 11 hours. And during that time, Moretti has been acting on the information I've provided, moving against the traitors I identified, restructuring his security, essentially reorganizing his entire operation based on intelligence that could be deliberately designed to weaken him. Mother of God. Elena breathed. She grabbed her phone, typing rapidly. If the first 6 names were sacrificial pieces, people someone was willing to burn to establish your credibility, then the real attack is coming now. While Moretti's organization is in chaos from internal purges, while his attention is focused on identifying remaining traitors, while he's distracted, the explosion shook the building's foundation. Books tumbled from shelves. The window cracked with a sound like a gunshot, and both women were thrown to the floor as the lights died. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in red. Stay down, Elena shouted, pulling a gun from beneath her jacket. She moved to the door, yanked it open, and fired 3 shots into the hallway. Natalia heard screaming, running footsteps, more gunfire from somewhere below. What's happening? What you just predicted. Someone's attacking while we're vulnerable. Elena grabbed Natalia's arm, hauling her to her feet. We need to move now. The laptop, the poems, leave them. Your life is worth more than data Adrian can retrieve later. But Natalia jerked free, running back to the desk. She yanked a USB drive from the laptop, copying the files with shaking fingers. If she died tonight, at least the evidence would survive. At least Moretti would know who'd betrayed him, even if he couldn't trust her explanation. Another explosion, closer this time. The window shattered completely, spraying glass across the floor. Through the opening, Natalia glimpsed fire blooming from the restaurant below, smoke billowing into the night sky. Now! Elena screamed, and this time, Natalia didn't argue. She clutched the USB drive and ran. The hallway was chaos. The 2 guards who'd been stationed outside lay motionless in spreading pools of blood. Elena stepped over them without pause, her gun sweeping corners, her body moving with the efficiency of military training. They took the stairs at a run, emergency lighting casting everything in nightmare shades of red. Who's attacking? Natalia gasped, her lungs burning. If I had to guess, the same people who created your poetry. They set this up perfectly. Feed Adrian intelligence about internal traitors. Let him tear apart his own organization hunting them. Then strike while everyone's confused and suspicious. Classic military strategy. Make your enemy defeat themselves before you throw the first punch. 3rd floor. 2nd floor. The sounds of fighting grew louder. Gunfire, shouting in multiple languages, the crash of furniture being overturned. Elena paused at the landing, gesturing for silence. Below in the restaurant's main dining room, figures moved through the smoke and shadows. Russian accents, Elena whispered. Not the 2 from earlier. These are professionals. Military contractors, probably. The kind you hire when you want a job done clean and permanent. How many? Too many. We need another exit. They reversed course, taking a service corridor that led toward the kitchens. But as they rounded a corner, a figure materialized from the smoke. The scarred Russian from earlier, his suit torn and bloodied, a gun in his hand. The translator, he said in Russian, his smile terrible. How convenient. Save me the trouble of finding you. You were part of this from the beginning. Natalia replied in the same language, her mind working frantically. The poetry, the deal, everything. You brought information designed to destabilize Moretti's organization so someone else could attack while he was vulnerable. Very smart. Too smart, perhaps. We didn't expect you to decode things so quickly or to realize the trap before it fully closed. But no matter, you've served your purpose. He raised the gun and time seemed to slow. Natalia saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw Elena moving too slowly to intercept, saw her own death approaching with mathematical certainty. The shot that rang out came from behind them. The scarred Russian jerked backward, a red flower blooming on his chest. He looked down at the wound with something like surprise, then collapsed. Adrian Moretti stepped through the smoke, his own gun still raised, his suit covered in soot and blood. He looked like something from a classical painting of hell. A dark angel walking through flames, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "Nobody kills my translator," he said quietly. "I haven't finished using her yet." Moretti moved past Natalia and Elena without a glance, checking the fallen Russian's pulse before removing weapons and a phone from the body. His hands were steady, methodical, a man performing familiar tasks while the world burned around him. Only when he'd secured everything did he finally look at Natalia. "You figured it out," he said. It wasn't a question, too late to prevent this. She gestured at the chaos surrounding them. Smoke still billowing from multiple directions. Fire alarms shrieking their warnings into the night. "But soon enough to save both our lives, which counts for something." He checked his gun's magazine, then looked at Elena. "Status. At least 20 hostiles, professional grade. They came through the front and back simultaneously, using the internal confusion from your purge as cover. Most of your security is dead or pinned down. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they secure the building completely. The Riverside property compromised. Got word 3 minutes ago. Everyone there is dead, including the thin Russian. So whoever orchestrated this cleaned up their loose ends." Moretti's jaw tightened. "Smart. Ruthless. Exactly what I would do in their position." Another explosion rocked the building, this one from above. Ceiling tiles rained down, and somewhere in the distance the groan of stressed metal suggested structural damage. The restaurant that had stood for 30 years as Moretti's fortress was being methodically destroyed. "The archives," Moretti said suddenly. "Underground, below the wine cellar. Reinforced doors, separate ventilation system. Emergency tunnel to the parking garage 3 blocks away. If we can reach it, we can get out alive." "That's across the entire building," Elena protested. "Through the main dining room where most of the hostiles are concentrated. Then we go fast and we go hard. Miss Petrova, stay between us. You're carrying information that someone went to extraordinary lengths to create and equally extraordinary lengths to bury. That makes you valuable." He looked at her directly. "It also makes you a target. Don't slow us down, don't try to be heroic, and for God's sake, don't get shot. Clear?" "Clear," Natalia managed, though her voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking through her body. They moved as a unit. Elena, on point. Moretti taking rear guard. Natalia sandwiched between them, clutching the USB drive like a talisman. The service corridor led them past the kitchens, now a smoking ruin of overturned equipment and shattered glass, and toward the main restaurant floor. The dining room had been transformed into a war zone. Tables were overturned, expensive artwork riddled with bullet holes, crystal chandeliers hanging at drunken angles. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, both Moretti's men and the attackers, their blood mixing on marble that had once gleamed like polished ice. The air smelled of gunpowder, smoke, and something darker, the copper tang of mass violence. "Life side," Elena whispered. 3 hostiles behind the bar. Moretti didn't respond verbally. He simply moved, his gun tracking toward the bar with fluid precision. 3 shots, 3 bodies falling. Elena was already moving toward the next cover point, her own weapon finding targets with the same deadly efficiency. Natalia ran when they ran, stopped when they stopped. Her entire world narrowed to the space between 2 people who killed with the casual expertise of long practice. She'd seen violence before. Her father's death had ended any illusions about the world's gentleness. But never like this. Never so personal, so immediate, so utterly devoid of drama or hesitation. They reached the wine cellar stairs as gunfire erupted from somewhere behind them. Bullets chipped the walls, sprayed plaster dust, forced them to dive through the doorway, and slam the reinforced door shut. Heavy bolts slid home, and for a moment, there was blessed silence. "That won't hold long," Moretti said, already moving down the stone stairs into darkness. "They'll breach it with explosives in under 3 minutes. Keep moving." The wine cellar was a cathedral to expensive taste. Climate-controlled chambers lined with bottles worth more than most cars. organized with the precision of a museum collection. Moretti led them through the labyrinth without hesitation, past vintages from before Natalia was born, around corners that all looked identical in the emergency lighting. "How long until they realize we're not still in the building?" Natalia asked. "They already know," Elena answered. "Professional assault teams don't leave escape routes unmonitored. Whatever's waiting at the other end of your tunnel, Adrian, it won't be friendly." "I know, but it's better than waiting here to die." The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a false wall of wine racks. Moretti pressed a concealed switch and an entire section swung outward, revealing a passage that looked like something from a Cold War spy novel. Concrete walls, bare bulbs, the smell of damp earth, and old secrets. "This was built during Prohibition," Moretti explained as they entered, Elena sealing the entrance behind them. "Modified in the 50s when my grandfather ran this place, it saved my family more than once. With luck, it'll do so again." They moved quickly through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. Natalia's mind raced, processing everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. She'd gone from invisible waitress to decoder to fugitive to survivor, each transformation marking a point of no return. Whatever happened next, whoever she'd been before tonight was gone forever. "The poems," she said suddenly. "The last 12 that I didn't finish decoding. They're the key, aren't they? Not to identifying traitors, but to understanding who really orchestrated this attack." "Obviously," Moretti replied without slowing. "But right now, staying alive takes priority over understanding who's trying to kill us. We'll worry about the poetry when we're somewhere safe. There might not be anywhere safe if we don't understand the endgame. Think about it. Someone created an elaborate trap using Russian classical literature as code. That level of sophistication, that depth of cultural knowledge combined with intelligence tradecraft, is not common. In fact, I can only think of one organization that routinely operates that way. The FSB. Elena breathed. Russian Foreign Intelligence. More specifically, whoever my father worked for before he tried to leave. Natalia felt pieces clicking together, a picture emerging that was both clearer and more terrifying than anything she'd imagined. My father didn't just translate for Russian organized crime. He managed communications between the FSB and their American assets. When he died, they lost a critical piece of infrastructure. What if this entire situation, the poetry, the attack on Moretti's organization, everything isn't about money or territory? What if it's about recruitment? "You," Moretti said flatly. "They want you. They want someone who can do what my father did. Someone bilingual. Someone with his training. Someone positioned to operate in American criminal circles. They created a situation that would force me to reveal my skills, then engineered events that would make me dependent on you for protection. Now we're both compromised, both desperate, both perfect candidates for coercion." "That's insane," Elena protested. "The FSB doesn't orchestrate elaborate criminal attacks just to recruit one translator. They do if that translator represents a generational asset. My father's network took decades to build. Recreating it would take another decade, or they could invest a few $1,000,000 in 6 months of planning to position his daughter in the exact same role. From their perspective, it's efficient." The tunnel ended at a heavy steel door with a modern electronic lock. Moretti entered a code and the mechanism clicked open, revealing a parking garage bathed in fluorescent light. 3 black SUVs waited, engines already running, courtesy of some prearranged signal Natalia hadn't noticed him send. "We'll discuss international conspiracy theories once we're mobile," Moretti decided, moving toward the nearest vehicle. Right now, the gunfire came from 3 directions simultaneously. Muzzle flashes lit the garage like strobe lights, bullets sparking off concrete and metal. One of the SUVs exploded in a fireball that threw all of them to the ground, heat washing over Natalia's back like the breath of hell. Elena was up first, returning fire, her face a mask of controlled fury. Moretti rolled behind the second SUV, his gun tracking targets Natalia couldn't see through the smoke and chaos. She lay pressed against cold concrete, clutching the USB drive, feeling utterly useless and simultaneously grateful for her own uselessness. At least she wasn't expected to join the killing. 30 seconds, Moretti shouted. Get to the third vehicle. But before they could move, a new voice cut through the chaos. It spoke in Russian, amplified by some kind of megaphone, the words echoing off concrete walls with brutal clarity. Natalia Petrovna Petrov, daughter of Viktor Mkayevich Petrov. We're not here to kill you. We're here to bring you home. The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, Natalia heard her own heartbeat loud and frantic in her ears. She looked at Moretti, saw the calculation in his eyes, the awareness that whatever happened next would define everything that followed. Home, she called back in Russian, her voice stronger than she felt. I've been in America since I was 7. This is home. America killed your father. America left your mother to die alone and forgotten. America turned you into a waitress, invisible and powerless. We're offering you the chance to become what your father was. Important, respected, essential. My father tried to leave your organization. You murdered him for it. Your father failed to understand that some knowledge makes freedom impossible. He thought he could walk away from his obligations. We corrected his misunderstanding. You're smarter than he was. You understand that power requires sacrifice, that security demands loyalty, that survival means choosing the right allies. A figure emerged from the smoke. He was tall, somewhere in his 50s, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent years in harsh climates. His suit was expensive but not ostentatious, and he carried no visible weapon. Authority radiated from him like heat from pavement. My name is Dmitry Volov, he continued in Russian, though Natalia suspected he spoke perfect English. I was your father's handler. I tried to save him, but he'd already made choices that left us no alternatives. You don't have to make his mistakes. Come with us peacefully, and Mr. Moretti lives. Refuse, and everyone in this garage dies, including you. We'd prefer you alive and cooperative, but we'll settle for the intelligence you've already gathered. The USB drive, Natalia realized. You don't just want me. You want the decoded poems. You want to know what your own operation documented? The poems were created by one of our assets inside Moretti's organization, someone who's been documenting everything for 18 months. But our asset was killed 2 hours ago during Moretti's purge of suspected traitors. And the codes they used to communicate with us died with them. You're the only person left who can decode what they documented. That makes you valuable beyond measure. Moretti, still behind the SUV, spoke without showing himself. She decoded 35 out of 47 poems, identified 6 traitors, including your asset. Apparently, if you kill us, you get the USB drive, but lose the only person who can decode the rest. Which is why we're offering terms, Volov acknowledged. Miss Petro comes with us. The USB drive comes with us. You live free to rebuild your organization however you choose. In 6 months after we've extracted everything we need from both her knowledge and the remaining poems, we'll consider releasing her if she's been cooperative. Consider releasing her? Moretti repeated, his tone flat with disbelief. You expect me to hand over my translator on the promise of maybe seeing her alive again? I expect you to recognize when you have no negotiating position. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a parking garage with limited exits. Your organization is in shambles. Your resources depleted, your people dead or scattered. We're offering you survival. That's considerably more generous than you deserve, given how much damage you've done to our American operations over the years. Natalia's mind raced through options, finding no good ones. If she refused, everyone died, including herself, which would accomplish nothing. If she agreed, Moretti lived, but she disappeared into an FSB black site, becoming exactly what her father had been. A prisoner of her own expertise, too valuable to release, but never truly free. There had to be another option, some variable she wasn't seeing, some piece of the puzzle that would shift the entire board. And then she saw it. The flaw in Volov's plan hidden in his own words. You said your asset created the poems over 18 months, she called out in Russian. But you didn't know what they documented because the codes died with your asset. That means the poems weren't just documentation for you. They were documentation against you. Volkov's expression flickered. Just for a moment, but it was enough. Your asset wasn't loyal, Natalia continued, standing slowly, hands visible. They were building insurance, evidence against their FSB handlers, evidence of Russian intelligence operations on American soil, coded in a way that only someone with specific linguistic and cultural knowledge could decode. They were planning to defect, and they needed proof of their value to offer American intelligence services. That's why the last 12 poems are more heavily encrypted. They contain the most damaging information, the details about you and your organization. The silence that followed was different than before. Charged, dangerous. You're guessing, Volov said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I'm extrapolating from evidence. The pattern in the poems shifts after number 35. The literary references become more personal, more specific to Cold War-era intelligence operations. The last 12 poems aren't about Moretti's organization. They're about yours, names, methods, American contacts. Your asset was going to burn you, and you killed them before they could. Now you're trying to recover the evidence and eliminate anyone who might decode it. Which is why you're coming with us. No, Natalia said firmly. I'm not, because if I disappear into FSB custody, Moretti will deliver this USB drive to the FBI along with everything I've already decoded. Your American operations will be exposed. Your networks dismantled, your agents arrested or killed. You'll lose everything you've built here, all to capture one translator who would rather die than become what her father was. Moretti's voice when he spoke carried dark amusement. She makes an excellent point. I'm a criminal, Volov, but I'm an American criminal. The FBI has been trying to put me in prison for years, but they've never tried to kidnap me from a parking garage. There's a difference between American legal pursuit and Russian intelligence operations, and I know which one I prefer. If she dies, your entire network gets exposed. Those are your terms, not mine. Volkov's expression hardened. He raised one hand, and from the shadows at least a dozen armed figures emerged. Weapons trained on the SUV hiding Moretti and Elena. Then I suppose we have what the Americans call a Mexican standoff, he said coldly. Except I have more guns, more people, and considerably more experience in these situations. You can threaten to expose us, Moretti, but you'll be dead before you send a single file. And Miss Petrov, she'll watch you die knowing it was her stubbornness that cost you your life. Actually, a new voice interjected, speaking English with a crisp American accent. I think you'll find the situation more complicated than that. Federal agents materialized from impossible places. Behind vehicles, from doorways Natalia hadn't noticed, even from the tunnel they just exited. At least 30 of them, all in tactical gear, all carrying weapons that made the Russians' arsenal look inadequate. At their center stood a woman in her early 40s, blonde hair pulled back severely, wearing an FBI windbreaker over body armor. Her credentials were already displayed as she approached Volkov with the casual confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. Special Agent Sarah Chun, FBI Counterintelligence. Dmitry Volkov, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, assault with deadly weapons, and about 17 different violations of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. You have the right to remain silent, which I'd strongly suggest exercising because everything you've said in the last 10 minutes has been recorded and will absolutely be used against you. Volkov's face went carefully blank. Around him, his people began slowly lowering weapons as red laser sights painted them from multiple directions. The mathematics of survival had shifted decisively. How long? He asked quietly. We've been monitoring Adrian Moretti's restaurant for 6 months, Chin answered. Following a FISA warrant based on his suspected criminal activities. Tonight's assault lit up every alarm we have when we heard Russian being spoken during an apparent assassination attempt. We escalated to counterintelligence protocols. And then Miss Petrov here decoded your entire operation loud enough for our surveillance to capture. We owe her a debt of gratitude. She turned to Natalia, her expression softening slightly. You're not under arrest, Miss Petrov. In fact, I'd like to discuss employment opportunities. The FBI's linguistic division could use someone with your skill set, but that's a conversation for later after we process this crime scene and debrief everyone involved. And Moretti? Natalia asked. Mr. Moretti will be detained and questioned extensively. What happens after that depends on what he tells us and how cooperative he chooses to be. Chen's smile was sharp as broken glass. I imagine a man of his intelligence will recognize when cooperation serves his interests better than obstruction. The FBI's New York field office was nothing like the dramatic portrayals Natalia had seen in movies. It was fluorescent lights, beige walls, endless corridors that all looked identical, and the pervasive smell of industrial coffee mixing with industrial cleaning products. She'd been there for 6 hours, moving between interview rooms while different agents asked the same questions in slightly different ways, probing for inconsistencies, testing the boundaries of her story. Special Agent Chen finally entered the room where Natalia had been waiting for the past 40 minutes. She carried 2 cups of what smelled like actual coffee, not the burnt sludge from the break room, and a tablet computer under her arm. "Sorry for the wait," Chen said, settling into the chair across from Natalia. "Your story checked out. Every detail you provided about the poems, the FSB operation, your father's history. It all aligns with intelligence we've been gathering for years, but couldn't quite piece together. You connected dots we didn't even know were on the same page. What happens now? Now we discuss your future. The USB drive you saved contains evidence of the most sophisticated Russian intelligence operation on American soil since the Cold War. The remaining 12 poems you didn't finish decoding? They're a roadmap of FSB activities going back 5 years. Names, locations, methods, American contacts. It's a counterintelligence treasure trove and you want me to decode them. We want to offer you a job. Full-time analyst position, GS-12 salary scale to start, with promotion to GS-13 after successful completion of probation. You'd work in our counterintelligence division translating Russian communications, decoding intelligence documents, and providing cultural context for ongoing operations. It's desk work mostly. Safe, legal, and surprisingly well compensated compared to waiting tables. Natalia sipped the coffee, which was indeed much better than the break room variety, and considered. It was tempting, a legitimate job, a fresh start, a chance to use her skills for something beyond mere survival. But there was a problem. "Moretti," she said. "What happens to him?" Chen's expression became guarded. "That's complicated. Adrian Moretti has been a priority target for federal law enforcement for over a decade. RICO statutes, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering. We have enough evidence to put him away for multiple lifetimes. Tonight's events give us additional ammunition. But he also just saved a federal investigation by protecting you until we could arrive. His restaurant was destroyed in an assault by foreign intelligence operatives, which technically makes him a victim. And according to your statement, he actively opposed the FSB's attempt to kidnap you, despite having every reason to simply hand you over and save himself." Chun drummed her fingers on the table. "The U.S. Attorney's Office is debating whether to charge him, offer immunity in exchange for testimony against the Russians, or pursue some kind of middle ground. What do you think should happen?" "I think the law isn't always equipped to handle situations this messy. Moretti is a criminal. He's hurt people, destroyed lives, built an empire on violence and intimidation. But tonight, he also chose to protect an innocent woman from a hostile foreign intelligence service. That counts for something, even if it doesn't erase decades of criminality. So you're going to use him? Get his testimony about the FSB operation, then throw him in prison anyway?" Chun met her gaze directly. "Probably, unless he's smart enough to negotiate a deal that actually serves his interests. A good lawyer, which Moretti can definitely afford, might argue for witness protection, reduced charges, even immunity if the intelligence he provides is valuable enough. The system has flexibility when it wants to. Can I see him? Why would you want to? It was a good question. Natalia examined her own motivations, trying to separate gratitude from Stockholm Syndrome, genuine connection from trauma bonding. Adrian Moretti was a criminal who'd threatened to kill her multiple times. He was also the man who'd stood between her and a Russian kidnapping team, who'd trusted her when every logical calculation suggested he shouldn't, who treated her like a valuable human being rather than a disposable asset. Because he deserves to hear the truth directly from me, Natalia finally answered, about what the poems contained, about what I decoded, about what happens next. He risked everything to protect information he didn't fully understand. The least I can do is explain what it all meant. Chun studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 15 minutes? Supervised, and understand that anything you discuss can and will be monitored and potentially used in legal proceedings. I understand. They led her through more identical corridors to an interview room that looked exactly like the one she'd just left. Adrian Moretti sat behind a metal table, still wearing his soot-stained suit, his hands free of restraints, but his posture suggesting he understood the futility of resistance. He looked up when Natalia entered, something complicated flickering across his face. "The translator," he said. "Still alive." I wasn't certain that would remain true once the FBI got involved. "They offered me a job." "Of course they did. You're exactly what they need. Bilingual, experienced with Russian intelligence techniques, and conveniently available now that your previous employer's restaurant has been reduced to rubble." His tone was dry but not bitter. "Are you taking it?" "I haven't decided yet. That's partially why I'm here, to understand what you're planning to do." "Planning?" Moretti laughed, the sound harsh in the small room. "My organization is decimated. 6 of my most trusted people were exposed as traitors or Russian assets. My headquarters is destroyed. Federal agents are currently seizing every property, account, and asset I own. I'm not planning anything. I'm negotiating survival, which is considerably less dignified than I'd prefer. The FBI might offer you a deal. Testimony against the FSB operation in exchange for reduced charges or immunity. And then what? Witness protection? A new identity in some Midwestern suburb, pretending to be a retired accountant while I watch daytime television and slowly lose my mind? He shook his head. That's not survival. That's just a slower death. Natalia pulled out a chair and sat, ignoring the watching agent by the door. "The last 12 poems," she said quietly. "I decoded them. While we were waiting for processing, I worked through the patterns. You need to know what they contained." Moretti leaned forward, suddenly focused. "Tell me, the FSB asset in your organization wasn't just documenting your operations. They were documenting a much larger network. Russian intelligence has been using organized crime families across the eastern seaboard as cover for intelligence gathering, money laundering, and influence operations. Your organization was just one piece. The poems list 7 other crime bosses who've been similarly infiltrated along with specific details about FSB handlers, communication protocols, and long-term strategic objectives." "Christ," Moretti breathed. "How long has this been running?" "At least 8 years based on the earliest references, maybe longer. The asset who created the poems was meticulous. They documented everything. Payments, meetings, operations that appeared to be criminal enterprise but were actually intelligence collection. It's comprehensive enough that the FBI could dismantle the entire network if they move quickly. Which is why you're valuable to them. You're the key that unlocks the whole operation." "Yes, but here's what the FBI doesn't know yet. What I only realized while finishing the decoding. The poems contain a second layer of information hidden beneath the intelligence documentation. Financial records. The FSB has been stealing from the criminal organizations they infiltrated, skimming profits, redirecting funds to offshore accounts, millions of dollars over nearly a decade." Moretti's eyes sharpened. "Account numbers, routing information, access codes, even passwords in some cases? Your asset wasn't just documenting the FSB operation for American intelligence. They were building leverage against their Russian handlers. Come after me and I'll expose both your intelligence network and your theft." It was insurance. Blackmail material designed to guarantee their safety. But they were killed anyway by your people during the purge. The FSB didn't know about the poems until after their asset was already dead. That's why they came after me so aggressively. They weren't just trying to recover intelligence. They were trying to recover evidence of their own. On point. Moretti was in the rear, covering their backs. Natalia was practically glued to him, holding on to that USB drive like it was her only lifeline, wedged right between Moretti and Elena. They were hauling ass down the service corridor, past the kitchen, which was a goddamn disaster zone. Smoked-out ovens, busted-up equipment, and glass everywhere. They were trying to get to the main restaurant floor. But the dining room? It was a straight-up war zone. Tables flipped, pricey artwork looking like Swiss cheese from all the bullet holes, and those crystal chandeliers hanging all crooked. Bodies were scattered all over the place. Some of Moretti's guys, some of the guys who'd attacked them, all bleeding out on marble that used to be so shiny you could see your reflection in it. The air was thick with the stink of gunpowder and smoke, and something else, something darker, that metallic tang of serious, mass casualty violence. Life sighed. Elena breathed, barely a whisper. 3 hostiles behind the bar. Moretti didn't say a damn word. He just moved, smooth as silk, gun tracking right to that bar. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots, 3 bodies hitting the floor. Elena was already booking it to the next cover point, her own gun spitting lead with the same cold efficiency. Natalia just did what they did, ran when they ran, stopped when they stopped. Her whole world had shrunk down to the space between these 2 people who could kill like it was no big deal. She'd seen violence before, sure. Her dad dying had wiped out any ideas she had about the world being a gentle place. But nothing like this. Nothing so up close and personal, so immediate, so totally without any hesitation or second-guessing. They hit the stairs down to the wine cellar just as the shooting picked up behind them. Bullets were chipping concrete, sending plaster flying, forcing them to dive through the doorway and slam that reinforced door shut. The heavy bolts slid into place. And for a hot second, there was quiet, a blessed silence. "That won't hold," Moretti said, already heading down the stone steps into the dark. "They'll be breaching that with explosives in under 3 minutes, tops. Keep moving." The wine cellar was like some kind of church built for rich people's tastes. Climate-controlled rooms filled with bottles worth more than some people's houses, all organized like they were in a damn museum. Moretti led them through the maze without even a flicker of doubt, past wines that were older than Natalia herself, around corners that all looked the same in the emergency lighting. "How long before they figure out we're not still in the building?" Natalia asked, her voice tight. "They already know," Elena said, flat out. "Pro-assault teams don't leave escape routes unguarded. Whatever's waiting for us at the other end of your tunnel, Adrian, it ain't gonna be a welcome wagon." "I know, but it's still better than sticking around here to die." The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a fake wall of wine racks. Moretti hit some hidden switch, and a whole section of the rack swung out, showing a passageway that looked like it came straight out of some Cold War spy movie. Concrete walls, bare bulbs, the smell of dirt and old, buried secrets. "This was built back during Prohibition," Moretti explained as they ducked inside, Elena sealing the entrance behind them. "My grandfather tweaked it in the 50s when he was running things. It saved my family more than once. With any luck, it'll do it again." They moved fast through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the close space. Natalia's brain was going a mile a minute, trying to process everything that had happened in the last half-day. She'd gone from being an invisible waitress to a codebreaker, then a fugitive, and now a goddamn survivor. And every single one of those changes felt like there was no going back. Whatever was coming next, whoever she was before all this went down, was gone forever. "The poems," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Those last 12 I didn't finish decoding. They're the key, right? Not just to figuring out who the traitors were, but who was really pulling the strings behind all this." "Obviously," Moretti said without slowing down. "But right now, the only thing that matters is staying alive. We can worry about who's trying to kill us when we're not about to get killed. But what if we can't be safe until we know the end game?" she argued, her voice tight. "Think about it. Someone set this whole elaborate trap using Russian classical literature as a code. That's crazy sophisticated, that kind of deep cultural knowledge mixed with spy-level tradecraft. It's not exactly common. I can really only think of one group who operates like that as a matter of course. The FSB. Elena sucked in a breath. Russian Foreign Intelligence? More specifically, whoever my father was working for before he tried to get out. Natalia could feel the pieces snapping into place. A picture coming together that was way clearer and way more terrifying than anything she'd imagined. My dad wasn't just translating for Russian organized crime, she said, putting it all together. He was running comms between the FSB and their American assets. When he died, they lost a key link in their operation. What if this whole thing, the poems, the attack on Moretti's operation, isn't really about money or territory at all? What if it's about recruitment? You, Moretti said flatly. They want you. They want someone who can do what your dad did. Someone who speaks both languages fluently. Someone with his training. Someone who can move around in American criminal circles. They set the whole situation up to force you to show your abilities, then made sure you had to rely on me for protection. Now we're both screwed, both desperate, both perfect for them to control. That's insane, Elena protested, shaking her head. The FSB doesn't stage some complicated criminal attack just to recruit one translator. They do if that translator is like finding the Holy Grail. My dad's network took decades to build up. It would take them another decade to rebuild it from scratch. Or they could just throw a few $1 million at 6 months of planning and put his daughter in the exact same spot. From their point of view, it's damn efficient. The tunnel finally opened up to a heavy steel door with a high-tech electronic lock. Moretti punched in a code and it clicked open, leading to a parking garage lit up with fluorescent lights. 3 black SUVs were sitting there, engines already running. He must have given some signal ahead of time that Natalia didn't catch. We can hash out the finer points of international conspiracy theories once we're on the move, Moretti said, heading for the closest SUV. Just then, gunfire erupted from every direction it seemed. Muzzle flashes turned the garage into a strobe light nightmare, bullets kicking up sparks off the concrete and metal. One of the SUVs exploded in a giant fireball, knocking them all off their feet. The heat hit Natalia like the devil himself was breathing down her neck. Elena was up first, blasting back with her own weapon, her face like it was carved out of stone. Moretti rolled behind the second SUV. His gun tracking targets Natalia couldn't even see through all the smoke and chaos. She was flat against the cold concrete, hugging that damn USB drive, feeling totally useless and kind of thankful for it at the same time. At least nobody expected her to be out there killing people. 30 seconds, Moretti yelled. Get to the third vehicle. But before they could even move, a new voice blasted through the chaos, loud and clear. It was Russian, amplified through a megaphone, bouncing off the concrete walls. Natalia Petrovna Petrov, daughter of Viktor Mikhaevich Petrov. We're not here to kill you. We're here to bring you home. The shooting stopped just like that. And in the sudden silence, Natalia could hear her own heart pounding in her ears, way too loud. She looked at Moretti and saw the wheels turning in his head, the understanding that whatever happened next was going to change everything. Home, she called back in Russian, trying to sound way more confident than she felt. I've been in America since I was 7 years old. This is my home. America killed your father. America left your mother to die alone and forgotten. America turned you into a waitress, invisible and powerless. We're offering you the chance to be like your father again. Important, respected, essential. Your father tried to leave our organization. We punished him for it. Your father didn't understand that some knowledge makes you lose your freedom, the voice continued. He thought he could just walk away from his obligations. We corrected his mistake. You're smarter than that. You understand that power costs something. Security demands loyalty. Survival means choosing the right allies. A man stepped out of the smoke. He was tall, looked like he was in his 50s, with a face that had seen a lot of weather. He was wearing an expensive suit, but nothing flashy, and he wasn't carrying any weapon that she could see. But he had authority rolling off him like heat off the asphalt. My name is Dmitry Volov, he said, still speaking in Russian, though Natalia was pretty sure he could speak perfect English. I was your father's handler. I tried to save him, but he'd made some choices that didn't leave us any other option. You don't have to make the same mistakes he did. Come with us peacefully, and Mr. Moretti gets to live. Refuse, and everyone in this garage dies, including you. We would prefer you alive and cooperating, but we'll settle for the intel you've already gathered. The USB drive, Natalia said, understanding washing over her. You don't just want me. You want the decoded poems. You want to know what your own operation has been up to. The poems were created by one of our assets inside Moretti's operation, Volov explained smoothly. Someone who's been documenting everything for the last 18 months. Unfortunately, that asset was killed a couple of hours ago during Moretti's little purge of suspected traitors. And the codes they used to communicate with us? They died with him. You're the only one left who can decode what he documented. And that makes you invaluable. Moretti, still pinned down behind the SUV, spoke up, his voice tight. She decoded 35 out of 47 poems, and ID'd 6 traitors, including your asset. So, sounds like if you kill us, you get the USB drive, but you lose the only person who can actually read the rest of it. Which is why we are making an offer, Volov acknowledged. Miss Petro comes with us. The USB drive comes with us. Mr. Moretti gets to rebuild his organization however he likes. 6 months after we have extracted everything we need from both your knowledge and the remaining poems, we will consider releasing her if she cooperates. Consider releasing her? Moretti repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. You want me to just hand over my translator based on the promise that I might see her alive again someday? I expect you to recognize you have no bargaining power. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and cornered in a parking garage with almost no way out. Your organization is a wreck. You're running on fumes. Your people are dead or running for the hills. We're offering you survival, which is way more than you deserve, considering the damage you've done to our operations here in America over the years. Natalia's mind was racing, trying to find a way out. No dice. If she said no, they all died, including her, which wouldn't accomplish squat. If she said yes, Moretti lived, but she disappeared into some FSB black site, ending up exactly like her father, a prisoner of her own skills. Too valuable to kill, but never really free. There had to be another option. Some angle she was missing. Something that could shift the balance of power. Then she saw it. The flaw in Volov's plan, hidden in his own words. You said your asset was creating those poems for the last 18 months. She called out in Russian, her voice clear. But you also said you had no idea what they meant because the codes died with him. That means those poems weren't just for you. They were against you. Corruption before other Russian officials learned about it. Moretti leaned back, you could practically see the wheels turning in his head. So, you're saying there's money, a serious amount of money, stashed in accounts the FSB thinks are untouchable, but they're not because you've got the access codes? Approximately $47 million spread across different accounts and shell corporations. Her tone was even factual. Money that was lifted from American criminal organizations, including yours, and funneled into FSB operations. Money that technically belongs to nobody since both the original thieves and the people they stole from are criminals. Money that someone who knows what they're doing could get their hands on and reroute before anyone even realizes it's up for grabs. Theoretically, Natalia conceded, her voice carefully measured. Although pulling it off would require a serious skill set, a whole bunch of international transactions, and timing that's tighter than a drum to avoid getting flagged by the FBI or Russian intelligence. But yeah, possible. Totally possible. The room went dead quiet. The FBI agent watching this whole thing shifted in her seat, looking like she was about to jump in on what was starting to sound like a conspiracy, but hadn't quite gone there yet. Why are you telling me this? Moretti finally asked, breaking the silence. You could keep this to yourself. Use it to cut your own deal with the feds or even grab the money yourself. Instead, you're handing me intel that could completely change my position at the negotiating table. Because you saved my life, Moretti, Natalia said simply, repeating her earlier sentiment. You had every reason to hand me over to the Russians, to ditch me in that parking garage, to put your own skin ahead of mine. But you didn't. You chose to protect me, someone you barely knew, and it cost you big time. That kind of move deserves to be paid back. Noble, Moretti mused. Also potentially dumb. Depending on how I play this information, I don't think you're going to do anything dumb. You're a criminal, but you're not reckless. You understand that $47 million could rebuild everything you've lost, but only if you play it smart getting to it, and even smarter about what you do after. Moretti stared at her, trying to read her, searching for a hidden agenda, a lie, anything that would suggest this was a setup. Whatever he saw must have reassured him, because his expression softened, not quite a smile, but almost. If I were to access these funds, hypothetically, he said carefully, and if I were to use them to negotiate a sweeter deal with the authorities, maybe by showing cooperation and offering more than just my testimony, would you be interested in keeping our professional relationship going? Assuming, of course, that I'm in a position to hire anyone after all this shakes out. Are you offering me a job? I'm suggesting that someone with your skill set would be a huge asset to an organization that's being built from the ground up. An organization that would need translators, analysts, people who know international intel and can make sense of complicated information. Legitimate businesses need those skills just as much as illegal ones. More, maybe, he added, since in the legit world, screw-ups have real legal consequences. Legitimate business, Natalia echoed, testing the words. You're talking about going straight? I'm talking about evolving. My father ran things one way. I ran them another. Maybe it's time for a third way. One that doesn't involve federal indictments and parking garage shootouts. He paused. The world's changing. Information is becoming more valuable than old-school crime. Someone who gets that, who can operate in both legal and extra-legal spaces, who's got connections in law enforcement and experience with international intel. That person could build something incredible. And you think I'm that person? I think we could be those people. If we're smart, you get a career that's way more interesting than listening to FBI surveillance tapes. I get a partner who actually understands the modern world instead of trying to solve 21st century problems with 20th century thinking. The FBI gets cooperation, restitution, and a feel-good story about criminals turning into productive members of society. Everybody wins except the FSB. The FSB, Natalia agreed, a hard edge creeping into her voice. They destroyed your father, killed my people, and tried to use both of us. They deserve to lose everything. The FBI agent cleared her throat, interrupting the potentially dangerous train of thought. I need to report this conversation to Special Agent Chin. The talk about accessing foreign accounts is getting into territory that needs to be looked at right away. Of course, Moretti said smoothly, not missing a beat. We're just tossing around ideas, talking about hypothetical possibilities. Nothing's been decided or agreed to. Miss Petrov is just explaining the information she uncovered while helping out with a federal investigation. The agent looked like she didn't buy it for a second, but she left to make her report. As soon as the door clicked shut, Moretti leaned in. You've got maybe 2 minutes before they come back with lawyers and a tape recorder. If you're serious about this, about any of it, I need to know now because once I start talking to the U.S. Attorney's office, I need to know what cards I'm holding. Natalia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She could take the FBI job. Safe, legal, respectable. Desk work, analyzing threats from a distance, never risking anything more than a paper cut or a headache. It was everything she thought she wanted. Stability, security, invisibility. But invisibility had almost gotten her killed tonight. Invisibility had left her helpless when the FSB came calling. Invisibility was just another word for vulnerability. I'll give you the account information, she said quietly, making her choice. All of it, but I have some conditions. Name them. First, you use some of the money to take care of the families of your people who died tonight. Not because you have to, but because it's the right thing to do. Second, whatever you build next operates within the law. I won't help you build another criminal empire. Third, my role stays undefined until I see proof that you're actually serious about going legit. I'll consult, analyze, translate, but I'm not making any promises until you show me this isn't just a way to get out of trouble with the feds. Reasonable terms. Moretti agreed. Anything else? Yes, Natalia said firmly. You teach me everything you know about negotiating, strategy, and how to operate in places where the rules aren't clear. You saved my life tonight, but you also showed me that powerlessness is a choice. I'm done choosing it. If I'm going to work with you, whatever that means, I need to learn how to navigate this world as an equal, not just an asset. Moretti smiled, and this time it was real. The first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Done. Although I should warn you that navigating this world as an equal means facing risks that invisible people never have to deal with. Once you choose to be seen, there's no going back. Are you sure that's what you want? I was invisible when the FSB tried to snatch me. I was invisible when your organization got infiltrated. Invisibility didn't protect me. It just meant nobody noticed when I was in danger. Fair point. He reached out his hand across the table. Partners, then. Conditionally, temporarily, and as long as neither of us gets arrested or killed anytime soon. Natalia shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't even a promise, but it was a start. The door swung open. Special Agent Chun walked in with two other people. A guy in a fancy suit who had to be from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and a woman with FBI credentials and a recording device. The negotiation was about to begin for real. Mr. Moretti, Chun said formally, we need to talk about the conversation you just had with Miss Petrov, specifically the stuff about foreign financial accounts and the possibility of accessing stolen funds. I'm happy to talk about anything that might help your investigation, Moretti replied, his tone perfectly reasonable. But I'll need to speak with my lawyer first. I'm sure you understand. Your attorney is in the building. We can have them come in right now. Excellent. While we're waiting, maybe you'd like to hear about my interest in working with federal authorities in exchange for some consideration regarding the charges against me. I think I have information that would be very valuable to your counterintelligence division. Information that Miss Petrov's work has made available. Chen's face didn't change, but Natalia could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Moretti was offering a deal. Information for leniency, cooperation for survival. The FBI had to decide if his information was worth letting a major crime boss potentially walk free. We're listening, Chun said cautiously. Not until my lawyer gets here. But I will say this. The FSB operation you disrupted tonight is bigger than you realize. I know most of the other 7 criminal organizations that have been compromised by Russian intelligence personally. I've got connections, history, and leverage that could help you take down the whole network. But that kind of cooperation requires some guarantees about my legal situation. And the $47 million Miss Petrov mentioned would make a great restitution payment to the government, showing I'm serious about making things right. Assuming, of course, that getting those funds doesn't get me into even more trouble. These are all details my lawyer will want to discuss. The lawyer from the U.S. Attorney's Office stepped forward. Mr. Moretti, I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney James Park. If you're serious about cooperating, we can talk about terms, but you need to understand that any deal would require full disclosure, complete transparency, and a real commitment to testifying against foreign intelligence operations. We don't make deals with people who waste our time. I wouldn't dream of wasting your time, Mr. Park. Time is the only thing you can't steal, launder, or get back. I learned that tonight, watching my restaurant burn and my organization fall apart. I'm 52 years old. I spent 30 years building an empire that was gone in 6 hours. I'd rather spend the next 30 doing something that doesn't involve federal indictments and Russian assassination teams. Legitimate business, Park said skeptically. You're asking us to believe that Adrian Moretti, one of the most successful organized crime figures in New York history, wants to go straight. I'm asking you to believe that smart people adapt to changing circumstances. My organization was infiltrated by foreign intelligence. My operations are compromised. My assets are being seized. Continuing the way I was would be insane. So yeah, I want to look at other ways to make a living. Ways that involve lawyers, accountants, and a lot less gunfire. Park and Chun exchanged a look. Years of experience weighing their options, calculating the odds. We'll need to run everything by our supervisors, Chun said finally. But for now, we're interested in talking about terms. Your attorney can start negotiations immediately, if they're available. They're in the building, Moretti confirmed. Probably giving your receptionist a hard time as we speak. Chun smiled thinly. I'll have them brought up. Miss Petrov, you're free to go. We have your contact information if we need more help with decoding. The job offer is still on the table if you're interested. Think about it and let us know." Natalia stood up, feeling completely drained. The adrenaline that had kept her going all night was wearing off, leaving her with the deep exhaustion that comes from surviving something awful. "What about the FSB?" she asked. "Volkov and his people are in federal custody, facing multiple charges. They'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which includes potential espionage charges that carry life sentences. They won't be bothering you or anyone else. And the other Russian assets in different organizations? That information is classified. But I can tell you that your decoding work has started the biggest counterintelligence operation against Russian organized crime in decades. You've done your country a great service, Miss Petrov. The question is whether you want to keep doing that officially or go back to your old life." Natalia looked at Moretti one last time. He looked back at her, and something passed between them without a word. Not a promise, not even an agreement, just a shared understanding that they'd made it through something impossible together, and that whatever came next would be shaped by that. "I need time to think," she said. "About everything. Take all the time you need," Chen replied. "But not too long. The world keeps moving, and opportunities don't wait forever." They escorted Natalia out through hallways and security checkpoints back into the real world, where the morning light was just starting to paint the Manhattan skyline gold and pink. The city looked the same. The same buildings, the same streets, the same constant energy. But Natalia felt changed, like the night had burned away some essential layer of protection, leaving her open to possibilities she'd never let herself think about. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Account information when you're ready. Take your time deciding. Either way, thank you for tonight. M." She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Not because she wasn't going to take him up on it, but because some decisions needed space and quiet to really think through. The USB drive in her pocket had enough information to change lives, destroy organizations, and maybe even change how criminal organizations and intelligence operations worked in America. And somehow she was the one holding that power. Not invisible, not powerless, not running from her father's past, but walking right into it and making it her own. A cab pulled up. Natalia gave her apartment address, then changed her mind and told the driver to take her to a 24-hour cafe she knew in Queens. She needed coffee. Real coffee. And time to think about whether she wanted to be an FBI analyst decoding other people's secrets, or something else entirely. Something that didn't have a job description yet. Something she'd have to make up as she went. The city flashed by the cab windows. Millions of people trying to survive in their own way. Natalia closed her eyes, let the exhaustion wash over her, and let herself smile. Her father had been destroyed because he was caught between two worlds. But maybe, with the right people and the right plan, being caught between worlds wasn't a trap. Maybe it was the best place to be. She'd figure it out one decoded poem at a time. 3 months later, Natalia stood in an office that still smelled like fresh paint and new furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Manhattan from the 30th floor of a building that had previously housed 3 hedge funds, a law firm, and, ironically, a Russian cultural organization that had moved to Brooklyn under mysterious circumstances. The brass nameplate on the door read, "Consulting, Language Analysis, and Strategic Intelligence." "Understated," Elena said, putting down a box of office supplies. She'd gone from being Moretti's security to something she called Executive Protection and Operational Coordination, which seemed to be half bodyguard and half business manager. Professional. Doesn't scream we used to dodge bullets in parking garages. "That's the idea," Natalia replied, adjusting a leather chair. The furniture was expensive but not flashy. The kind that suggested competence and good judgment, not money. Everything about the office was designed to look legitimate while still being flexible about what that actually meant. Her phone buzzed. A message from Adrian Moretti, signing the final paperwork at 2 p.m. Dinner afterward to celebrate. Natalia smiled. The final paperwork was his plea agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office. 12 months probation, a hefty financial restitution, and a promise to help with ongoing federal investigations into Russian intelligence operations. In return, most of the serious charges had been dropped, and he'd been allowed to turn his remaining legitimate businesses into what his lawyers called private consulting and investment services. It was Natalia had learned how powerful people reinvented themselves when they had to. The paperwork was different, the words were different, but the core was the same. Adrian Moretti would keep operating in places where information, connections, and carefully managed influence were more important than traditional business. And now, so would she. The difference was that everything they did would be legal. Mostly legal. Legal enough that the feds wouldn't care unless they crossed very specific lines that they'd both learned to walk with uneasy skill. "Dinner sounds good," she texted back. "The Italian place near your new office? Too predictable. I'm thinking Thai, the place in Chelsea that doesn't ask questions about business conversations." "Perfect." Elena watched the exchange, amused. "You two have gotten comfortable with each other. We're business partners. Comfortable is important." "Is that all you are? Business partners?" Natalia considered the question. Her relationship with Moretti was complicated, built on surviving together, reinforced by shared secrets, and made even more complicated by the fact that he'd once threatened to kill her, and she'd once decoded evidence that almost ruined his life. They met regularly to talk about cases, work together on projects that needed her language skills and his connections, and plan how to build something neither of them could have done alone. Was there attraction? Probably. Was there respect? Absolutely. Was there something more going on under the surface? Maybe. But relationships that started with near-death experiences needed time to grow beyond the crisis. "Ask me again in 6 months," Natalia finally said.